This is the Infrastructure Matters podcast, brought to you by the Futurum Group. We explore the latest developments in hybrid cloud computing and the technology that underpins it. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the latest trends and technologies that are shaping the hybrid cloud computing landscape. The Infrastructure Matters podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Please do not take anything reflected in this show as investment advice. Now your co-hosts, Stephen Dickens, Camberely Bates, and Krista Macomber of the Futurum Group.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of Infrastructure Matters. I'm Krista Macomber, and I am joined by both of my co-hosts this week, Camberely Bates and Steve Dickens. Camberely and Steve, thanks so much for joining today. It's great to catch up with you guys.
Mutual.
21 episodes. As I said off camera, I can't believe we've been doing this for 21 episodes now. It's crazy.
It feels like we just launched it a couple weeks ago, and we're here on Thanksgiving week already here in the US. So I really have no idea where the second half of this year has gone. I don't know about the both of you. Any good plans for the holiday?
Both of my kids are back from college, so that's cool. So we're hanging out with them. My birthday celebrations are going to carry on into this week. So
perfect.
This is supposed to last for the month.
Yep. All right. So I guess we can kind of jump into it. So Camberely and I were both on the road last week. We'll get to that in a minute. But before we do, Stephen, I know while we were traveling, I know last week you were covering some pretty exciting announcements coming out of the Microsoft Ignite event, particularly kind of involving some of their silicon developments.
Yeah, so Microsoft had been the only hyperscale vendor that didn't have their own custom silicon. So that was a bit of an obvious kind of miss. AWS has been there with Trainium and Inferentia. Google made some big announcements at Google Cloud Next, and it's been in the TensorFlow processor unit TPU space for a while. So Microsoft came out with MAI. Maya, it's pronounced, and Azure Cobalt. I think not surprising. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see some of this, and one of our sort of sister firms, Patrick Moorhead, did a really good sort of initial take. Pat's one of the people I follow quite closely from a CPU perspective. There was some very generic statements in the announcement around relative performance to other vendors. We're going to have to see that. We're going to have to look at that in some detail and dig under, where this is from a relative performance point of view. But it makes perfect sense for Microsoft to be doing this, given how invested they are with Copilot across the portfolio, and then also some of their other investments. We're not going to mention OpenAI, but certainly where they are with those guys. So I think it's really interesting and kind of makes perfect sense that you would see Microsoft getting into custom silicon.
So let's talk about that. That's kind of, you said it makes perfect sense for them to be doing this, and they're the last one of the bunch to get to this point. And Microsoft has been doing hardware things over the Surface and all that kind of stuff, and for quite some time. Why do you think they were taking so long to get here?
I mean, that's the interesting piece for me. As I say, AWS has been there with Inferentia and Trainium. I think we're on is it second or third generation of that technology now? Mm-hmm. Google made a whole bunch of announcements. Obviously, fabbing chips takes a while. This is not something you kind of hit in 5 minutes and go, let's do some product management. So they've been doing this with TSMC on the AMD architecture. But I think I am surprised that they're last to market, given how invested they are. whether this was just they thought they could get there with GPUs and kind of get there with NVIDIA first and sort of put it into Azure. Obviously, they're all sort of positioning forward. There was no kind of acknowledgement of kind of why they were last to market. I mean, I don't think that's going to be significant for how well they are considered going forward. And I mean, I think Microsoft's such a juggernaut in the AI space. They're going to, Azure is, arguably number one or number two, depending on who you believe and which stats you see. For AI workloads, I think they're going to be picking up a disproportionate share. So I don't think it's going to hold them back that they were sort of later to market, but it's going to be interesting to watch how. I'm, as I say, most interested on the relative performance.
Yeah.
So we start to see sort of benchmarks, start to see kind of some of that analysis from our team and from our sort of peer group. That's what I'm going to be most interested in, because I think for this space, everybody's going on H100s and A100s from NVIDIA. That's kind of your premium tier. But there's a whole raft of space for sort of below that where I see this playing a role. And then it's going to be interesting to see how Microsoft plays this from a Copilot perspective. Does Copilot run on this infrastructure going forward? Would make sense.
Yeah, it would. And I think coming out of Ignite last week, it was pretty clear Microsoft is the Copilot company now. I know I had a research note I wrote up regarding kind of the security Copilot and the integration that it's doing with its Veeam and XDR products for sort of the incident and recovery side of the house. And I know there's a whole swath of announcements. So, kind of to that point, Stephen, I think it really could make sense to kind of piggyback the two.
Yeah, and I know Mark Becue from our team did a whole bunch of research. There was a lot of Copilot announcements, so maybe check on the website and look for those. But I think we're going to hear more from Microsoft on this going forward. This was kind of the first of what I expect to be a number of updates from the team over there.
So, given the effort on Copilot, what should the IT infrastructure or audience? Infrastructure matters people be really thinking about? How does this impact them, or does it impact them at all?
Well, I mean, there's a workload placement discussion. You've now got another choice, another architecture choice, another platform choice to think about. So maybe you had less choice a week ago and now you've got more choice. I think as teams, as business teams come to you and say, where should we put this AI workload? You've got on-prem. We've covered a bunch of the on-prem vendors who are working with NVIDIA and Intel, with Gaudi and various others. There's that on-prem landscape, and that's going to be the right answer for certain workloads. There's going to be NVIDIA GPUs in the cloud, which might be the right answer for some of the workloads. And then there's going to be, the hyperscale options from the various vendors that we've just talked about as options. So I think choice is good. If you're looking at Copilot deployments, maybe that Microsoft is thinking that you're going to naturally sort of go with their offerings, and that would make a lot of sense, I think. Mm-hmm. So from an infrastructure team, if it's a Microsoft AI-based project, I think it's started, I'd expect Cobalt and Maya to become the default for Microsoft-based AI projects going forward.
Got it.
Yeah. I think the other angle is kind of leveraging AI, thinking about Copilot and kind of how it's being positioned. Another takeaway to me seems to be kind of from an IT perspective, being able to do their job more efficiently and more effectively, and kind of harness those tools to, again, do things like, I know in the data protection space, that I cover, it tends to be a lot about having more intelligent and effective backup schedules, and maybe using AI to, uncover threats more quickly and respond more quickly as well. So I think that's the other angle, as well, that I'm seeing for IT.
One of the things that can, and maybe we'll get Russ on here eventually, talk about all the tools, or even Mark. There's so much coming out and being blasted at, the IT guys on this AI, and it's very difficult to keep up with all the pieces that are happening. And unless you're living in it day by day, we kind of blow past it because we're watching stuff go by, right? That's our job, is watching the things go by. And so helping, kind of, this is why you should really be paying attention to this, or why, where this is going to impact you, coming up. So with this announcement. And to that end, I will mention that we're doing some work. We just released the first of probably several papers that we'll be doing with Dell and Broadcom on AI capabilities. This one is distributed learning that we just put out. We're working with another company called Scalar AI on the testing work. This being very, very, it's complex stuff that's going on. But the work that the Future Labs team is doing is working on the infrastructure pieces of it and how that, either benefits, improves, learning processes, how to most efficiently, put the pieces together. And particularly, this environment was showing a heterogeneous environment being able to do distributed learning. So it's we'll put a link into there, and if you're interested in download it and take a look at the paper.
I think that speaks to the workload placement point. I think people are now going to be thinking, I've got this AI project. Do I put it on-prem with a platform like Dell or HPE and watch my sort of private AI deployment from a performance point of view? So the work you're doing there is fascinating to see that from a benchmarking and performance testing. But then they're also going to be thinking, hey, maybe I've got a Microsoft 365 Copilot deployment. Where should I be putting that workload? They've got various choices. So I don't think it's going to be everything looks like a nail and I've got a hammer, here's one solution. I think to pick up on your point, as you look at an infrastructure team perspective, you're going to have a lot of different requirements and all platforms are going to be valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that might actually be a good segue to touch a little bit on the supercomputing conference that was last week in Boulder, Camberley. I know you had an opportunity to pop up there for about a day. I know we had a couple other folks that were there as well. So did you want to touch on that?
Well, I'll touch on it. I actually didn't make it to the show floor. I was having meeting with people outside of the show floor. I think the show floor was closing down at that point in time on Thursday. It was in Denver, and I would say the big uptick, one of the biggest upticks in my mind, is the amount of people that were there, which is a tracker to see where we are. But it was well over 12,000 people, from what I understand, which I think is almost double what we've seen before.
Is that show becoming the supercomputing and AI show? Is that really why it's doubled in size? Is it because it's not just big high-performance computing, sort of big meteorological or sort of Martini-based kind of financial modeling? Is it really because it's now the AI show? Is that what's...
It's still supercomputing. So whatever you want to call supercomputing, which spreads both sides. Traditionally, it has been, when I started attending it 7 years ago, and it's been going on for a long, long time, it's always been your large research centers, Lawrence Livermore, JPL, Fermi, and then all the university, everything from Switzerland to Italy to Purdue to Texas, with their big showcasing all their work. And understand why the universities are there is because they are getting grants, they're getting money from the private companies to do research on their big, huge supercomputers. So they come from all over the world. And there's two big shows. There's one here and there's another one over in Europe that's done in June. That's looking at this, the high performance computing. So yes, traditionally this has been all high performance computing, all the craze of the world, etc. Now that we're going into a world where this is becoming, AI started moving. We started seeing that move into the world. The ML AI craze that started maybe 5 years ago. That started picking up, but that was still very, very complex, and neural networks was still very complex. Yet, frankly, that's how Uber created themselves. It's Google, how they created themselves. And it's Facebook. All the stuff that they're doing is big secret computing. Now, with the generative AI, some might say we're democratizing this technology in certain ways. And so, yes, this is that uptick there. And you find everything from, water-cooled or, chemically cooled servers that got copper running all that kind of stuff, to cooling systems that are cooling these very large supercomputing areas, to all the data storage guys, the security guys, networking guys, etc., that are there, plus all the students that show up.
I am a water-cooled server nerd, I've got to admit. I do like a bit of
that just for you.
I got a chance to go around Lenovo's Neptune sort of lab when I was at their site. And if you haven't had a chance to take apart a water-cooled server, they are particularly cool. Yeah. I'm a nerd.
So a couple, there was a whole lot of announcements that came out of there. The one that I sat through beforehand was DDN's Infinia. DDN's DataDirect Networks. They've been around for quite some time. They've been well known in the HPC industry. They also bought a bunch of other companies recently and expanding their total market. But the Infinia one is a QLC box. So they've got the exascale, I think it is. That's the really super high end speed. This is the next level down. But it's also got a price performance number that's going to compete. We've seen a bunch of folks with QLC operations. VAST would be another one. Pure's got one. NetApp has got one. That's the trending of where that's going because of the cost and the capacity that they have. So that was one that we saw go out there. WDC, Western Digital, OpenFlex 24. It's an NVM, all NVMe box, RDMA. All the latest and greatest technologies that we see to speed the process. And it's for that market, these open boxes like what would come out of Western Digital or those folks, very often those are the boxes they're buying to put, their parallel file system of choice on, whichever one that is, whether it's Panasys or IBM's storage scale, I think is what it's like, also known as GPFS, which I think I'll probably call it that for the rest of its life. As opposed to anything
somebody in IBM storage marketing starting to switch.
I'm sorry to my friends over at IBM that named the thing storage. It's not very descriptive. I mean, I'm going to get it confused.
You're just going to go with GPFS just to stick with it.
Yeah. That's a call out from my friend O'Flaherty. There you go. Would you tell the guys to rename it GBFS because that's what I like it named. Anyway.
It's a general purpose file system. It does what it says on the tin. I mean, why would anybody in naming want to get hold of that?
Anyway, so yes, all big stuff. We had a couple of our guys there. Unfortunately, I didn't make it this year, even though it was in my backyard. But there we go.
Well, I think Daniel recorded a whole bunch of videos. I think Keith Townsend was there. I was about to say Keith Winton, but Keith wouldn't have done a great job of covering high performance.
Mr. Townsend.
Yeah, Keith Townsend did a whole bunch of videos, so we'll maybe put some links to those in the show notes so you can check out the rest of our team who were there.
For sure. So that might be a great opportunity to talk about the reason why Camberley wasn't, at most of supercomputing. Was that we were also at the other event that was in the Seattle area last week, which was Veeam's annual Analyst Summit, which they host every fall. And always a great event in terms of just they make sure all their executives are there. It's always great, kind of jam-packed agenda talking about the portfolio strategy, Danny Allen, their CTO, his session is always the one that runs about half an hour over because us analysts can't let him get off of the stage or kind of, take his seat again because we always have a million questions. we also got some great insight into kind of the state of the business, and also kind of where Veeam is thinking about taking their kind of go-to-market strategy and their messaging. And I'll kind of just chime in with some overall takeaways, and Camberly, I'm sure you'll have plenty to add as well. But my kind of post on LinkedIn was that I've been saying it for a few years now, and if it wasn't true before, it certainly is now. It's just this is not your niche VM backup company anymore. And really, they haven't been for a while, but it's been really interesting to see the business evolve. So they talked about, I believe it was 1.5 billion in annual recurring revenue for the business, with 50% net growth. They're at 450,000 customers. But really kind of beyond the financials, when we think about the workloads that Veeam is covering. So not only are they covering, again, kind of the VM side of things, but they've added, certainly some of the key enterprise workloads, but also a lot of the more modern, is a good way to describe it, workloads. So they acquired Kasten, a couple of years ago for the Kubernetes container front. They've been very active in terms of expanding their coverage of SaaS and kind of infrastructure as a service workloads. So kind of covering the workload spectrum, but also the newer development is actually in terms of how Veeam is deployed and procured by customers. So what I mean by that is they acquired a platform called Cirrus that was by a development engine called CT4 out of Australia. I believe it was about a couple months ago. So Veeam is officially moving into the first party backup as a service space. They've had kind of through their cloud service providers, they've had the SaaS delivery option for a while now, but that was kind of a key highlight there. So again,
Krista,
go ahead.
That one is that the way? Is that similar in the way that people should be thinking about something like Metallic?
Yes.
From Commvault?
Yep.
Because I know we've seen a lot of that sort of first person kind of space evolve. And I mean, maybe can you just? I know you've been really close to Commvault, and you went out and saw some of their stuff, and they made some big announcements.
Yes.
Was it on the 9th, I want to say?
Yeah, that sounds, November the 9th, that sounds right. It was either the 8th or the 9th.
November's a blur so far, but I mean, is that where you see the overall backup as a service space going?
Yeah, so what I would say is that we're seeing demand for backup as a service in general. So we feel there's some research that we published earlier this year that said about 30% of the respondents in that study indicated that they're using some sort of backup as a service option. So it's there's definitely interest. And really what this is hosting the backup software in the public cloud, as opposed to either the customer hosting the backup software on their own on premises, or going through kind of a managed service, or kind of even kind of a one of these cloud service provider partners that we mentioned. And so we've seen a lot of the demand popping up around particular workloads, Microsoft 365 being a big one. And really that's because from a customer perspective, it just tends to make a lot of sense. If I'm already subscribing, in this case, to the application in the public cloud, why don't I just subscribe to my data protection, my backup software in the public cloud as well, and kind of streamline that procurement, and ideally the kind of some of the operations as well.
The other reason that, Krista, that is also picking up is because Microsoft and Salesforce have gone public and saying, this is your responsibility.
Yes. Yep.
They have been warned, and that will generate some business that's going on.
Yes.
So I have to back up my Google Gmail account. That's on me.
Shocker.
Google hasn't come out and publicly said that yet.
Right.
It's only Microsoft and Salesforce, but they are being told that, you are responsible for this, and to take care of it yourself. We should expect to see some upgrades from the big cloud providers on their backup software offering. And so this will continue to heat up this next year because it's a new space and it's growing. Both 365 Salesforce are growing,
Yeah.
But also the backup as a service space is growing. So there's more awareness that I need to take. I need to take care of my precious little data points.
Yep. It's taken time. I mean, I made this comment in conversation with Veeam last week. I've said it with Commvault and some other players in the space as well, that I feel like I've been having the conversation for 2 or 3 years now that your recycle bin in Microsoft 365 is not your backup, strategy. And so it's definitely taken a little time to take hold. But, to Camberly's point, I think getting that nudge from these vendors, and the other parallel I draw as well is I was out at AWS Reinforce earlier this year, back in the June timeframe. It's AWS, their security conference, and a big theme on the keynote stage was the fact that it is still the customer's responsibility to protect their data, even though it's being hosted in AWS. So they were very clear to talk about, from an AWS perspective, what they're doing to bring resiliency and security to their infrastructure, but also the fact that they're trying to bring some tools to empower the customers to protect their data. So definitely. Yeah. So Camberly, any other takeaways from you from the Veeam show? I know I kind of laid out, some of what I saw, but I'd love to hear what you saw at the event last week.
Well, I'd echo that. It's Veeam is well beyond the VMware backup company, and they're working on building. They've got a new executive team in there in the last 2 years, pretty much across most of the board. And Danny's still there. Danny is just an awesome person, as she said. But we have Anand and John Jester, and Mr. Jackson, who's the CMO. They're all relatively new into the company and leading the company and going into that next level of space. That, as they go and grow more into the enterprise, they do have the ability, because they've covered so many of the functionalities that you need to have on any kind of enterprise data protection. I think that they're filling in the gaps, along with what seems to be some changes in willingness to look at other options that are showing that the enterprise gives them, an opportunity to possibly really grow in that space. So expecting them to do so in the future. So kind of big stuff there. But next week, Mr. Steve and I,
our travels are not done.
Mr. Steve and I are in Vegas at the wonderful reInvent Crazy.
I'm expecting maybe 1 or 2 announcements from AWS. I think they might have some things to launch. Maybe we get to 3 announcements. We're joking here because AWS seemed to launch 200 products at reInvent. So as analysts, it's drinking from the fire hose as you get hit with announcement after announcement. So it's going to be a busy week.
It will be an extremely busy week, starting with on Sunday, us getting in there. The focus clearly, it's like, is there any other topic? Yeah, there are a couple of other topics, but the big focus being AI coming out of there. They are hammering down on that, and we can see that from some of the stuff that they've put on our schedules to introduce us.
Maybe I should run the same competition that I ran for Google Cloud Next. The over-under with one of the analysts was, how long does it take them to say AI? How many times do they say AI?
No, you're going to run out of numbers.
Well, Google managed to say it 50 times in 22 minutes. So maybe I should sort of track to see whether AWS kind of sort of does more or less. But yeah, it's going to be AI all the way next week, I'm pretty sure.
The other thing I'll be interested to hear is any kind of stories around hybrid multi-cloud environments and where that is all going. Because I think there's been some of the noise about that and the noise this last year on cost to cloud. So that's going to continue to be we're going to continue to see that need to be tuned, taken care of. So that's what I'm anticipating. So I cannot believe we have gone for almost 30 minutes, and I'm not sure we talked. Oh, me.
There's a lot to talk about at this time of year.
I know.
There's been a couple things to catch up on for sure.
Definitely. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Camberly and Stephen, safe travels out to Las Vegas. We look forward on our next one to hearing all about everything from the show, all these announcements from AWS. I know there's a ton of partners that are there as well it's a very, very active show floor. And I know we've got a ton of meetings set up. So we are looking forward to catching up on that on our next one. And until then, we want to thank everyone so much for joining us. Please do like and subscribe and all that good stuff so they don't miss a future episode. And again, we look forward to catching up with you next time. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.